They were enemies, at least, that's what the war had taught them. The Americans came in with tanks, guns, and the weight of victory. The Germans, broken and starving, hid behind shattered walls, clutching their children in silence. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of bullets, the soldiers reached into their pockets, pulling out pieces of bread, chocolate bars, and canned rations. Little hands reached forward, trembling with hunger, unsure if it was real. Mothers watched, their hearts caught between fear and disbelief, as the enemy knelt down and shared food with their sons and daughters. In that single moment, the battlefield disappeared. No uniforms. No borders. No hate. Just human beings, sharing what little they had left. And in the ruins of war-torn Germany, the greatest victory wasn't won with weapons. It was shared through kindness. Germany, 1945. The war was finally over, but peace had not yet arrived. Cities lay in ruins, smoke still rising from the bones of once lively streets. Children wandered barefoot through rubble, searching for scraps of bread, their eyes hollow from hunger. The people who had once believed in a powerful Reich now faced the cold truth: survival itself had become a luxury. When the American soldiers marched in, the air was thick with fear. To the Germans, they were the conquerors, strangers with guns, representing everything that had destroyed their world. Mothers pulled their children close, whispering, "Don't look at them." They expected punishment, revenge, or worse. But instead, they saw something they never imagined. A soldier knelt, tore open his ration pack, and offered food to a trembling boy. One gesture, that broke years of hatred. In that quiet exchange, the victors and the defeated became simply human again. The story you're about to hear isn't about battles or flags. It's about the day when compassion crossed enemy lines, and changed hearts forever. The war had ended, but Germany still looked like a battlefield that refused to rest. Smoke lingered over towns, the stench of burnt metal and blood clung to the air, and the people who survived moved like shadows through what was left of their homes. Every sound, the crack of wood, the low hum of trucks, carried the weight of uncertainty. No one knew what would come next. For many German civilians, the war's end did not feel like peace. It felt like another kind of invasion, one that stripped away not just their possessions, but their pride. They were told the enemy was coming, that American soldiers were brutal and unforgiving. Rumors filled the air faster than hope could breathe. "They will take our food, our homes," whispered one neighbor to another. "Hide your daughters," said another voice, trembling with fear. In the small town of Aschaffenburg, the echo of artillery had only just faded. Bombed-out houses stood like broken teeth, sharp against the pale sky. Inside what used to be a school, families huddled together, mothers, widows, and children too young to understand what surrender truly meant. Hunger was no longer an emotion. It was a constant, biting presence, gnawing at their ribs. At dawn, the rumble of American trucks rolled in. Soldiers, young, dusty, exhausted, stepped out with weary eyes. Their uniforms were crisp, but their faces carried the same fatigue as those they now watched. They were told they were entering enemy territory, yet what they saw didn't look like an enemy at all. A little girl stood barefoot near the road, holding a broken doll with one missing arm. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair tangled. She stared at the convoy not with hatred, but with confusion. Behind her, a woman, perhaps her mother, held a bundle of rags, whispering something under her breath that sounded like a prayer. Private James Holloway, just 21, watched her from the back of the truck. He had seen death before. Normandy, Bastogne, the long road through France, but this was different. This was silence. No gunfire, no orders, just the haunting stillness of a people too tired to fight. His stomach growled. He reached into his coat and pulled out a tin of rations, beans, a small chocolate bar, and a piece of bread hard as stone. He looked at it, then looked at the girl again. The officers had warned them not to interact with civilians, but Holloway couldn't turn away. He stepped off the truck. The sound of his boots made the woman flinch, pulling her child closer. The soldiers around him froze. For a moment, no one spoke. The language of fear needed no translation. Then, Holloway did something that would echo far beyond that small German street. He knelt down. Slowly. Carefully. From his pocket, he took the chocolate bar, the one he'd been saving for days, and placed it on the ground in front of the little girl. The girl didn't move. Her eyes darted to her mother, who stood frozen, torn between suspicion and hope. Holloway pushed the chocolate closer, then took a step back, raising his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. Finally, the child stepped forward. Her small fingers trembled as she picked it up, staring at the silver wrapper like it was treasure. She looked up at him, uncertain. Holloway nodded once, then smiled, a tired, human smile. And then it happened. The mother began to cry. Not loudly, but softly, the kind of cry that had been trapped inside for years. Around them, other soldiers watched, unsure what to do. One by one, some reached into their own ration packs, offering bits of bread, canned meat, and cigarettes. Soon, what began as one soldier's quiet act became a wave of unexpected mercy. Civilians who had hidden in the shadows began to step forward, drawn by the strange sight of their conquerors feeding their children. The air changed. The tension broke. For the first time in years, the sound of laughter, faint but real, returned to that broken town. Private Holloway didn't think of himself as a hero. He was just tired of hate. As he watched the little girl nibble the chocolate, he felt something he hadn't felt in months, a sense of purpose that didn't involve destruction. In the ruins of Aschaffenburg, the war was still ending. But in that moment, among dust and hunger, something greater began, the fragile rebirth of trust. The next morning, the town awoke to a silence that felt different. It wasn't the fearful silence of war anymore, it was the kind that comes when people begin to breathe again. For the first time in years, the German villagers didn't hide when the Americans passed by. Windows cracked open. Curtains moved. Children peeked out, searching for the strange men who had given them food instead of commands. Private James Holloway sat on a wooden crate near his camp, writing in his journal. His handwriting was shaky from exhaustion, but his words were steady. "I don't know why I did it," he wrote. "Maybe because she looked like my sister. Maybe because I wanted to feel human again." He paused, then added, "Yesterday, I learned that kindness weighs less than guilt." Nearby, Sergeant Miller noticed a few soldiers sharing cigarettes with a group of curious German boys. It was an odd sight, soldiers and former enemies laughing at broken English and hand gestures. The sergeant didn't stop them. Maybe he didn't have the heart to. Maybe he understood that after so much killing, these men needed to remember what it meant to live. The food rations were limited, but word spread quickly. Mothers began approaching the American camp, cautiously, holding the hands of their children. The soldiers had been told to stay alert, there could be spies, danger, hidden weapons. Yet when they saw those gaunt faces and hollow eyes, the warnings felt absurd. One woman brought a small basket filled with wildflowers, tied together with a piece of torn fabric. She placed it on a soldier's jeep and said softly, "Danke." The soldier, a young man from Kansas named Tom Riley, didn't speak German, but he understood perfectly. He smiled, handed her a tin of beans, and nodded. The line between conqueror and conquered began to blur. Around campfires that night, the soldiers didn't talk about victory or glory. They talked about home, about mothers, about little brothers, about how strange it felt to be thanked by those they were told to hate. Somewhere among the ruins, the children started playing again. It began with a single stick, then a ball made of rags. Laughter echoed faintly through the cold streets, mixing with the soft rumble of American engines. To those who heard it, it sounded like something holy. In the mess tent, Corporal Daniels looked up as a group of kids approached the fence. He hesitated, then grabbed a handful of biscuits and waved them over. The children looked uncertain until one brave boy, maybe 10 years old, ran forward and took the food. His smile was toothless but radiant. Daniels grinned back, pretending not to notice his own tears. That simple act began to spread beyond the camp. In nearby villages, American patrols started leaving bits of food behind on doorsteps, bread, apples, even chocolate when they had it. It wasn't policy. It wasn't strategy. It was something older, something that war had nearly erased: compassion. For the civilians, it was hard to understand. For years, they had been told the Americans were monsters. Yet now, those same men were feeding their hungry children, sharing laughter, even fixing wells and broken carts. Suspicion turned into confusion, and confusion into gratitude. Old men would nod in respect as soldiers passed. Women began to lift their heads when speaking. Hope, fragile and uncertain, crept back into their eyes. In one moment, a child named Annalise walked into the camp carrying a small wooden toy. It was cracked and worn, but she offered it shyly to a soldier as a gift. The soldier, unsure what to do, accepted it with both hands, bowing his head slightly. For him, that toy became more valuable than any medal. When Holloway saw this, he wrote again in his journal that night. "We came here to win a war," he wrote, "but maybe what we're really doing is winning ourselves back." And as the firelight flickered over tired faces, it became clear that something deeper than victory was happening. Amid the ruins of Germany, hearts were rebuilding faster than cities. For the first time in years, both sides remembered that even in war, humanity can still find a way to survive. Days turned into weeks, and the once broken village began to breathe again. The rumble of tanks grew softer, replaced by the clatter of rebuilding, hammers on wood, shovels scraping earth, laughter returning in cautious bursts. The townspeople no longer flinched at the sight of an American uniform. Instead, they waved. It was hesitant at first, but each day, it grew braver. The Americans had been ordered to move on soon, to occupy other sectors and continue the long mission of peacekeeping. But in that short time, something permanent had already taken root. The soldiers had stopped being invaders in the eyes of the villagers, they had become protectors, men who patched roofs, shared medicine, and showed the children how to carve toys out of scrap wood. Private Holloway spent his evenings near the same stone wall where he had first met the little girl. Her name, he learned, was Clara. She came every afternoon with a smile and a single dandelion in her hand, offering it as if it were gold. Her mother would stand nearby, nodding silently, still unsure how to say thank you in English. But Holloway didn't need words. He could read it in her eyes, the gratitude, the peace, the understanding that kindness had survived when everything else had burned. Sometimes the soldiers joked that they were becoming too soft. "You'll go home and miss these kids," Sergeant Miller teased one night. Holloway shrugged. "Maybe that's the point," he replied. "Maybe we were supposed to remember what it means to care about someone again." There was truth in that. The war had stripped them of so much: friends, innocence, belief in goodness itself. But now, in the heart of what used to be enemy land, they were rediscovering those lost pieces. Each smile, each shared meal, each repaired doorframe felt like stitching together something torn beyond repair. Then came a cold morning in March. Orders arrived: the unit would leave Aschaffenburg within 24 hours. The men packed their gear quietly, their movements slower than usual. Word spread quickly through the town, and by sunset, families began to gather near the main road. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone felt the same ache of farewell. As the convoy prepared to move, Clara appeared again, holding her mother's hand. She carried something wrapped in a piece of cloth, a small loaf of bread, baked with the last of their flour. She ran up to Holloway, her cheeks red from the cold, and handed it to him with a nervous smile. "For you," she whispered in broken English. Holloway knelt, unwrapped the bread, and saw a small flower pressed into the crust, a dandelion, just like the one she always brought. He wanted to speak, but no words came. So he saluted her instead, a soldier's gesture of respect. The little girl giggled and mimicked the motion, her tiny hand trembling but proud. Behind her, other children approached the soldiers with small gifts, hand-drawn pictures, ribbons, pieces of carved wood. The men accepted them quietly, some smiling, others wiping their eyes when no one was watching. When the engines roared to life, the crowd didn't cheer. They simply stood there, waving, tears shining in the fading light. The soldiers waved back, their faces hard and soft at the same time. As the trucks rolled out of town, Holloway looked back one last time. The people were still there, the same people he had been told were his enemies. Yet now, they were something else entirely. He thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the hunger, the chocolate bar that had started it all. In a war built on hatred, one act of kindness had rippled outward, transforming lives on both sides. In his journal that night, somewhere on the road to Frankfurt, Holloway wrote his final entry. They told us victory meant ending the war. But I think true victory is remembering our humanity after it's over. He closed the book, leaned back against the truck wall, and listened to the quiet hum of the road, a road leading away from war, towards something uncertain yet alive. Behind him, in the distance, the ruined town glimmered faintly under the moonlight. For the first time in years, it wasn't just surviving. It was living. When the soldiers left Aschaffenburg, the silence that followed was heavy yet sacred. The echo of their engines faded into the horizon, leaving behind empty roads and full hearts. For days, the villagers spoke of them, the men who came with weapons but left behind warmth. The bread they shared, the laughter they sparked, and the memories they gave became stories whispered at firesides. Clara kept the chocolate wrapper, folding it neatly and hiding it inside her doll. Her mother would often catch her staring at it before bed, a reminder that even in the ruins of war, kindness could bloom like a wildflower through ash. For Private Holloway and his unit, the journey continued through the broken veins of Europe. They saw new cities, new faces, new scars, but none touched them quite like that small German town. In the letters they wrote home, they didn't mention battles or victories. They spoke of the children, of the dandelions, of the quiet exchange that had made them feel human again. War had taught them how to destroy. But that one moment, the moment a soldier shared his last chocolate bar with a hungry girl, taught them how to rebuild. Not cities. Not nations. But souls. History remembers who won and who lost. It remembers treaties, generals, and empires. But what it often forgets are the tiny acts of grace that hold the power to rewrite everything we think we know about enemies. In the ruins of 1945 Germany, when food was scarce and hatred was easy, compassion became the rarest weapon of all, and the most powerful. Because the truest victory of World War II wasn't in the surrender signed in faraway rooms. It was in the moment one heart reached across the line that divided humanity, and offered something as simple, and as sacred, as bread. And long after the gunfire ceased, that gesture kept echoing through generations, reminding the world that even in its darkest hour, the light of kindness never truly dies.